Today I'm trying out this new trend that I saw called BookTok, Yes, No, or Maybe, where I'll go through a bunch of popular books that are on BookTok and tell you whether you should yes, read it, no, not read it, or maybe. I went through a bunch of book lists on the internet as well as BookTok itself to find some of the popular books from this year and prior years to make up my list of 11 books that we're going to go through today. All of the books are linked down below, so if there's any you want to buy, go ahead and purchase them from Amazon, and that helps with this channel as well. Also, if you like this type of reviews and book lists, you can like and subscribe to make sure you see them in the future. First up is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I'm sorry to everyone who loves this book and this author, but this is a no for me. I truly just didn't understand the hype around this one. It's a second-hand romance, which isn't my favorite trope to begin with, but it takes readers back and forth in time between these two characters who grew up together at their lake house. So we go back to their 6 years that they spent growing up as friends and then turning into something more, as well as the present day where things are clearly off between them. They broke up a long time ago and they're seeing each other for the first time in a while. The whole book just kept building up to this big reveal about what happened all those years ago that broke them up, and honestly, it was just too slow of a story to make up for all of that time spent. It got frustrating knowing that this whole story hinged on this one event, and then when it was ultimately revealed, it just kind of made me more annoyed with the characters. So one of those romance books that was just not for me, not a fan. Next up is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This one's going to be a yes for me. While I didn't adore it quite as much as everyone else, I still found it was a really sweet fantasy book and had a cute love story in it, so I still overall liked it. I need to read the second one. I'll get around to that sometime, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the story continues. My favorite aspect was probably just the time period. So it's set in like an alternate 1940s Europe, which I thought was unique and something a little different than a lot of other fantasy novels, so that definitely drew me in. Then we have A Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is a hands down yes, probably my biggest yes of this entire list. I remember reading the first book years ago and just getting completely lost in this fantasy world and thinking it was the most fun that I've had reading in a long time. And then I started reading book 2 and I was just a complete goner. All 4 books in this series. Okay, there's also a novella, but we can just skip over that one. It's fine, but not super worth reading. But the 4 full-length books are phenomenal and just seem to keep getting better and better, which you don't always find in a series. They're action-packed, full of rich detail in this fantasy world, and there's tons of compelling characters that you're just going to fall in love with. While I heard that some people have a little trouble getting into the first book, they found it a little slow. I didn't have that problem. I thought it was a great read right from the beginning, so I'm sure you're going to love this too. Or if you didn't love the first book, keep going, and I promise they will get better and get more exciting, and you're going to be turning pages so fast by the end. Next up is a little different with a dark romance. It's Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This has to be a maybe from me. I technically haven't read it yet, but I'm planning to. I just feel like it's very important to know what you're getting into before you choose to start this one or not. It is definitely a dark romance. It focuses on a stalker and his prey and the romantic relationship that they form. So if you're prepared and know what it's about going in, I think it sounds like it could be an interesting read, but if that does not sound up your alley, then this is a definite skip. Next we have, of course, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. You can't have a list of BookTok books without something by Colleen Hoover on it. Now, it feels like most readers have a very much love-hate relationship with her. They either love her books, adore everything she's written, or just refuse to read it, think it's trash, and not worth reading at all. I fall more in the middle, so there's definitely been some books of hers that I really adored, some that I thought were just okay, but It Ends With Us is probably my all-time favorite of hers. It had an undeniable impact on me personally, and I think it's just a really important story that she's telling. I know some people believe that she's romanticizing domestic violence or profiting off of these situations, but if you read, I think it was her author's note at the end, she talks about her own personal experience with this, so she's drawing off of her life experiences to tell this story. And I think it helps provide insight into what women who have experienced domestic violence go through, why they might still love their abusers or struggle to leave a relationship in that situation, and it just created a lot of empathy for people in those situations in a way that I had never experienced before. It's an incredibly powerful book, one that I think everyone should read, and it just blew me away. Now we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Morena Garcia. This one has a pretty iconic cover, which is probably part of why it was so popular on BookTok, but this is a hard no from me. Man, did I hate this book. It intrigued me because it is a like a gothic thriller type, and it, portrayed this creepy old house as basically one of the characters in the book, and it's got a historical setting. So I thought all of those factors together would turn into this really intriguing kind of thriller mystery novel. No, it was just super weird, and it got really weird really fast. Basically, the house just had like this living mold in it that started making all the characters do these crazy things. It was just not for me. Up next is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Now we're talking something that's right up my alley. This is a definite yes. It's one of her romances that is loosely based on Schitt's Creek, apparently, but I've never seen the TV show, so I don't really know how accurate that is. But it does revolve around this like socialite who ends up moving to a small fishing village, and she's like a fish out of water in this place. She ends up taking over renovations for a small bar and falls for one of like the local fishermen, and it's just got a lot of fun aspects with her trying to figure out how to acclimate to this town that's just completely different from everything that she's used to. And there's this great enemies to lovers romance. The two main characters just have terrific banter and tons of chemistry. This is a steamy one, so it's an absolute yes, but if you're not into super spicy books, you might want to skip it. Otherwise, I think everyone will just love this. Another romance that I picked is Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. This is a newer one. It has a really beautiful cover, which I think is part of why so many people have picked it up. I'm going to say this is a yes, and that is despite it having the surprise pregnancy trope. This is a trope that I normally avoid, and I know for some people it can be a trigger warning, so I wanted to make that very clear that that is involved in this book. But if it was going to be done well, this book managed to do it. So if you're normally not a fan of that trope, like I was, I would still recommend giving this one a shot. Turning into the young adult category, my next book is The Inheritance Games. This is one of those books that I actually purchased from a bookstore because I was so excited to get a chance to read it, but it's a no from me. No denying that the idea for the book is intriguing, where basically a teenager gets a chance to earn the inheritance of this wealthy old man by completing a series of like puzzles and riddles, but at the same time she's staying with the man's like actual family at his estate, and she's kind of going up against his grandsons to try to be the first person to figure out these riddles and ultimately earn that inheritance. But the puzzles and riddles that were included were like less than impressive. I thought they were going to be a little bit more clever or interesting. They just kind of fell flat for me. And then there was also this like forced romance with the grandsons and kind of managing that whole thing where she's supposed to be enemies with them, but then she's kind of falling for one or two of them, and the whole thing just didn't work for me. Then we have A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. So this one I'm categorizing as a maybe. I did love the first book. A Touch of Darkness is the first book in the series, but it's the first of 4 books, plus there are 3 other books which are Hades' retelling of the story. So this is a retelling of Persephone and Hades' romance / relationship from Greek lore, and I love their story. So I've found a lot of retellings that I absolutely adored, and this first book was fantastic, but then the next like 6 books in the series just kind of keep continuing on with their story, or like I said, giving Hades' perspective of the same exact events, and to me it just felt like too much material for these 2. So I'm not gonna keep going with the series. So I almost recommend this like as a standalone, or if you're really into this specific story, then you've got a lot of material you can cover, but maybe just read the first book and kind of stop it there. But overall, that's why it's just a maybe from me. And I had to end on a high note with one of my all-time favorite books, which is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is a definite yes. It was one of my favorite books when it came out. I've reread it a couple times because the story is just so fascinating. I found this was a great example of a unique concept that was actually perfectly executed. So we meet Addie in the 1700s, and she makes a deal with a demon to live forever, but there are consequences, and that whenever she turns away from someone or they do not see her anymore, they immediately forget her. So she can live her life however she wants, but she will not be remembered by anyone. So the story weaves through different time periods as Addie grows accustomed to this new life she created for herself, as well as the demon who keeps popping in to check on her throughout these different time periods. And then we also find her in present day when Addie meets a young man in New York City who actually remembers her name after seeing her for the first time. So this just throws everything she knew about her life into disarray, and she's trying to understand how this one person is breaking this curse on her and what it means for her and for him. This one is popular for a reason. I highly recommend it and think it's one of the best books that BookTube has found. Let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these thoughts, or if you have different opinions, or if there's any BookTok books you've found that you would give a yes, no, or maybe to as well.